while we're waiting, any suggestions for May? Anything you'd like to cover? Oh, you were going to do something, weren't you?
There you go.
No. He might not get to it.
He will.
He might not.
Well, my Docker part won't be that long.
I tried to watch one of those videos that you said to watch. It was kind of annoying. Yours will be far more interesting.
Okay. So, hello everyone. How are we doing?
Good.
So tonight I'm going to talk about Docker and containerization and what it is. I'm not going to go too far into it because it can get quite lengthy and we don't have enough time. But my aim is trying to tell you enough to start the cogs ticking around. That's what happens for me, and one thing led to another here. Good thing is that everything is really well documented. Even the official Joomla Docker, you can download that and get going. There's a Windows app for it, there's a Mac app for it, it's command line tools. So I do plan on getting through that a little bit quicker than expected. See how it goes, so then we can get onto Git. With the Git stuff, I'm probably not going to spend too much time using things like GitHub. It'll be more so around the command line stuff because having an understanding of the simplest concepts for it is better than just understanding a GUI, essentially. Right? Anyone here ever heard of Docker at all? Apart from when I've mentioned it? Okay. So some things I'm going to cover. What it is, what a container is. I'll explain what Docker Compose is and what container stacks are and how we use it here at Butterfly. And then I'll quickly show you a tool that I use called Portainer. Okay. So what is Docker? Docker is simply a tool designed to make it easier to create, deploy, and run applications by using containers. Right? That's all it is. Containers allow a developer to package up an application with all the parts that it needs. Okay? And this means we can ship it all out as one package. The developer themselves can rest assured that the application will run on any other Linux machine regardless of the customized settings that the machine might have and could differ from the machine used right in the testing code. So essentially, it doesn't matter how you build, like what system you build your container on. If you build it on a Windows machine, you package it up, you can deploy it on a Linux server. Okay, that's one of the best things about it. So, in the context of Butterfly, which I refer to quite a bit, we currently have 6 developers. We did have a lot more. Each one of those developers sets up their dev environment completely different to another. Now, when they build things with Docker, because each container specifies all the little bits and pieces that it needs, we can deploy that to any system and know that it's going to run the exact same way. So it takes out, long before we started looking at Docker and containers, we had issues where devs would say build a Joomla site and they decide to build it using PHP 7. We'd go to deploy it. Myself and my team would never get told that had happened. So this is when PHP 7 started becoming the norm. We'd go deploy it onto a server that has PHP 5.6 and you get errors and the site doesn't work, and then you spend hours going, what's going on, trying to fix it and all that, and then dev goes, oh, it needs PHP 7, and you're like, what, couldn't fucking tell me that, So this takes that whole thing out of the equation. So containers. Containers are a standard unit of software that packages up code and all its dependencies so the application runs quickly and reliably. from one computing environment to another. The container image is meant to be lightweight. Sometimes it's not always lightweight. So when you build an image, you usually start from a base. And that base could be anything from a full-blown Ubuntu package, with everything installed being hundreds and hundreds of gigs. Or you can start from a base of, say, Linux Alpine, which is a distribution of Linux, where it's pretty much next to nothing, and you only install the packages that you need, and you're shipping something that is, you know, anywhere between a couple of kilobytes to a couple of meg. So it's meant to be lightweight. Very important when it comes to storage on the server and all that, but at this stage, the main thing you need to remember is meant to be lightweight. It's standalone, executable package of software that includes everything that needs to run an application. The code, runtime, system tools, libraries, and all that. They always run the same regardless of the infrastructure. So containers that run on the Docker engine, you have standard, which is a Docker created. So Docker created the industry standard for containers. It's not like you have Docker and you have some other company and some other program that have 20 different ways of doing it. When you're doing things around Docker, there's a standard for it. There's a standard way of building your images and all that jazz. It should be lightweight. So the containers themselves share the machine's operating system kernel and therefore do not require an OS per application, driving higher server efficiencies, reducing server and licensing costs. Oops. And they're secure. Applications are safer in containers, and Docker provides the strongest default isolation capabilities in the industry. On that note, so when I first got brought into the land of Docker and containers was when we were looking at a way to deal with our older Joomla clients, our 1.5, 2.5 sites that didn't want to pay to have their site pretty much rebuilt into a stable version. Because of their vulnerabilities, we wanted to isolate them so they're on their own. A lot of them were on a shared server, so they did pose a high risk. And essentially what this gave us the opportunity to do was move the site into what we call a stack, and basically everything gets isolated into it. The very loose analogy I like to use is, think of your fridge like a shared server, okay? You put in your leftovers, but you don't put glad wrap on them. They go all moldy, they affect the rest of the food in your fridge, right? With containers, you got a big Tupperware container, and then inside that you got little Tupperware containers with your leftovers in it, and they're all got lids on it, and then the big one's got lids on it. They can sit in there and go moldy, but they're not going to affect anything in the fridge. Only what's inside. Okay? So same thing with containers is only the containers that you say can talk to each other can access each other. They don't have access to their host operating system. I can draw a diagram as well.
You're so talented.
My whiteboard skills aren't that great.
Can we get keys for our Tupperware containers?
You just turn the camera slightly.
Can you lock your Tupperware containers?
You can. Okay, so the old days, we have a server here, right? So this is your host.
Yeah, it's pointing the right way now.
And on here, we have our clients, right? Client A, B, C. So we got those, they're web directories, and we've also got database as well if you're just keeping it simple. Now there's nothing stopping, so if this client A got hacked or infected, the hacker can also get into there, can also get into there, can also get into there, and before you know it, everywhere. when we look at containers in the simplest way, the bare simplest way, we have client A. Okay? I'm not going to explain exactly what controls this stack, but in this stack we have a web container. We might have a DB container. You might also have a Apache or Nginx container, and so on and so forth. We have client B, and we have container, 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 container. Now what Docker does is it locks these containers together into that stack. So yes, if for whatever reason, I mean the default security with containers in Docker is still pretty good, but if the web container gets hacked by a Joomla vulnerability, that hacker is only, generally speaking, stuck in there. So client B is not going to notice. Their data is safe. Okay, that's the main thing to keep in mind. When you get to the technical side of it, you can configure containers to talk to other stacks and all that jazz, but best practice is you have everything isolated and it's all good.
Are you not using more resources because you're duplicating your data, your web server stack, your Apache stack, your PHP, your database, the whole?
You can look at it as a yes. You could be utilizing it. It depends on your architecture. So what I can actually do with containers, I can limit the amount of CPU and RAM each container uses. It probably wouldn't be great to have one monolithic server with several stacks on it, right? It's a generic scenario. I mean, here at Butterfly, we set it up in a way so we'll have a server host that runs the web stack, DB host, that's separate. That web might have a QA and staging. They're separate containers, separate stacks, but they're still running the same host, runs fine. There's a whole other subject to go down, because what you're actually doing with containers is you're breaking everything down into what you call microservices. So it actually makes it a little bit more efficient to run. So, but yeah, that's going down the more in-depth stuff. So when you run Docker, you find your image. So an example is the Portainer app, for example, that I use. When I get that started, I essentially run a Docker command, which basically says, build and start me up a Docker from a specific image, open up these ports. So with Portainer, I usually open up like port 9000 or whatever, and get it up and running. And it works like that. What you can do is you have what's called a Docker. There's another piece of thing that adds on to Docker called Docker Compose. And it's a way to, it's like a config file where you can set all of your settings that you want for a specific Docker stack. So, Docker Compose is a tool for defining and running multi-container Docker applications. It's a YAML file that configures all of your services that you're going to be running. In one command, it'll read through this file and start up every container that I've got in there. You can have multiple compose files to override values. So for example, I'll have a base Docker Compose file, but then I might have a separate one which is a QA file, a staging file, and a prod file, and any values within that file will override the base one. So when you're setting things like URLs and stuff, I'm going to have a different URL for staging and whatever. That might. So you can see here. Can I enhance this? Apparently not. Anyway. I've got one container here, one container here, another one here, and so on and so forth. So it builds a container stack. It's simply a group of containers that by default are connected together within their own little network. Right? So by doing Docker Compose, if we look at the old way of doing things, it's essentially the same as starting up several VMs. All pre-configured, ready to go.
So that would be like a VPS or something?
Yeah.
VPS on steroids.
Kinda. So
Except you'd have to have a different VPS as each container, which would be impractical.
yeah, it's like starting up a bunch of VPS. It's like having 7 VPSs inside one VPS,
Yeah.
but they're not the size of a VPS.
No. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Okay, so for example, if we look at Joomla, what you need to run Joomla, right? So you'll have your Joomla container. You'll have a MySQL container to run your database. If you don't like doing MySQL stuff by command line, you'll also have something like a phpMyAdmin, or here at Butterfly we use a simple web GUI called AdMiner.
So that would be another container.
Another container. And then we also have I use a Nginx proxy container, which basically web traffic comes through to the server on port 80, Nginx proxy grabs that, and then sends that traffic to the correct container that it needs to go to.
So hang on, with the Nginx proxy, so that's essentially Apache.
It's essentially Apache. So we use Nginx instead of Apache.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So replace Nginx with Apache.
Yeah, okay. But so that would be a full version of Apache, or is it leveraging off the server?
So you can use Apache on the server to do. So there's a couple of ways you can set it up. So when we first started doing it, we'd have Nginx running on the server itself, because Nginx works as a proxy server. We then proxy redirect and everything to the right container on the specific port, right? Apache, you'd run Apache as its own container in its own little world and all that jazz.
Yep.
Do I have one good resource is hub.docker.com.
So why a separate Docker container for every little piece? Why not one container per client and each of it runs?
Because you're separating everything into microservices.
Why? What's the benefit of that? We're so used to having everything all in one place. I mean, the one server, it connects to its local MySQL, and it's got the web server all built in. There's got to be some reason to then break it down into these microservices.
There is.
I would understand breaking it down into microservices if there was one database, one Apache server that served multiple clients. Then you're, rather than having a container per client that had 1,000 different Apache servers, 1,000 different, you're leveraging off one.
But then you don't get the isolation of clients versus
exactly
clients.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So in this case, there are various reasons. One is going back to what I previously said about packaging everything up and putting it anywhere you want, right? So if I have my containers running, but I'm running Nginx on the actual host, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to pick everything up. I'm going to move server over there. But now I've got to actually go and grab everything. Instead of just moving everything up, doing one command and starting everything up, I've also got to go copy all my Nginx config, put it over, copy all my configuration and all that jazz.
Does it mean you potentially have one central place to control all your package versions as well? If you need different PHP?
It's one
Just
command
use
to
that.
upgrade.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here you can see Apache have an official Apache image to use. And it's just the web server part of it. Okay.
So they've actually provided a cut down, slim down, lightweight container for you to use.
Yeah. So instead of actually deploying a full-blown Ubuntu server that has Apache ready and running,
Yeah.
you're literally taking that web server part of it. And as you can see, it's well documented on how to use. I use one that's been built, it's not an official one, but Nginx Proxy, which I quite like, by Jay Walter. Essentially, I started up on my Joomla container. I had one environment variable, virtual host equals wherever my domain is, and the Nginx Proxy container reads that and automatically goes, okay, I've got to send any traffic through to that container from that domain. So if I have a few, I might run that one Nginx container, but I have several domains, and that Nginx container will just, when I visit by one domain, send it to one container. When it's the other domain, send it to the other container, so on and so forth. So, who here knows who Ethical Nutritionists is? Who here has heard of Inner Health Plus?
Mm-hmm.
The little blue guys. Okay. So, how has Butterfly used containers? We just recently launched this new website. Which is all, it's a containerized Joomla environment. And it runs on the similar the architecture I mentioned before, where we have a web host which runs the web containers on it, and then separate DB hosts, and they talk.
So you have those split physically?
Yeah, they're physically two separate VMs in Azure.
Oh, okay.
So what I'm doing now is changing how we do these deployments. So I'm moving everything to AWS. That's my goal.
Right.
And I'm looking at building scalable websites. So running Elastic Beanstalk, and basically the servers themselves mean nothing. It's just compute power.
Sure.
So I want load balancing and all that jazz.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas the architecture for this was done before I got involved, and I've had to kind of deal with it. But another one which is set up pretty much the same way, site called Bridge Housing. It's another Joomla site, and we're also currently building another application where there are several parts to it. There's a React app, then there's a Django container, which is a Python framework. We have a WebSocket container, and we have my Nginx proxy that I'm using. Okay, and essentially the React app serves as the front end, and then the Django application the Django container serves as like an API system, and it looks after user access and all that jazz.
So
And
this isn't a Joomla app. The website-
definitely not. No.
Okay, right.
So what it is, it's a learning tool, and essentially someone's stuck on Mars, and you have a mission controller that sends questions to this console, and students have to answer these questions to try and save the person on Mars. So it's like the reverse of the Matt Damon movie, right?
Is there poo and potatoes?
So now Portainer is a cool tool. It's a web-based user interface which allows you to not only build your container applications, it also allows you to manage it. So here at Butterfly, I use it more to manage my containers, so I can go in there, easily click to view logs, restart containers, see, and all that jazz. But you can do things like create application templates, and it will actually build them for you and all that jazz.
Can you manage resources inside Container? So
To the point of when you provision your containers, allocating how much memory and all that jazz that it's allowed to use. So I think I have it running on my dev.
QUERTY.
So here, when I look at it, I can see that I've got 2 containers running, which is just Portainer. Right. So if now, if I open up this is not one that I've built, by the way. This is one that I've taken over support for. It's a Monash system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a Docker compose up. And if that's all I had to do, we can see that it's going to go through a whole bunch of steps. Actually, no, it won't, because I've already built these and shut them down. So it's basically running through a bunch of scripts. I left off my -D option. So what I just did was I started everything, but everything's running there, and I can see all the what's accessing and all the server calls it's doing. If I actually add a -D option, it's going to detach that, so it's going to run in the background. And if I refresh this page, we'll see that now I've got all these containers running. So we've got the web container, we've got a DB container, an Elasticsearch container, a whole bunch of stuff going on there. And I've got to import a database. Where is it? Anyway, I just got to import a database and that's up and running. It's a huge application. It's a WordPress site. It does a bunch of stuff.
So if you make changes to a Docker container, like we were saying before, maybe you need a different version of PHP or something, is that updating the actual contents of the container itself, or is it deploying a whole new one that replaces?
So when you build the containers, it creates an image, and it will, if it doesn't pick up there's any changes, it will just deploy its current version. So the way it builds it is it builds everything in layers. So if I make a change, it will change a specific layer of a container. So it won't necessarily rebuild the whole thing, it will just update the layer. This one?
So you could theoretically use the whole kind of system to replace sort of hosting, couldn't you?
Not replace. You still need a server at the end of the day.
Yeah, but
But that server could be AWS or something like that.
Yeah.
yeah, so you could be hosting it on AWS.
Yeah, and then when you get into the realm of AWS, you got to think about scaling horizontally, not vertically. So the standard way of the old way of doing hosting is I'm going to get the biggest server I can with heaps of storage and all that, and just chuck everything on that.
Yeah.
Whereas with AWS, you want to think, no, I want to do it cost effective. I want all my applications to run with the smallest server that I've got,
Yeah.
but 10 of them if I need to.
Yeah.
Right, so that's what I'm working on now, is so I can have a Joomla site that's all load balanced and all that jazz. So all the time it'll run on one, say T2 micro. But then when CPU starts peaking and all that because of either high traffic or whatever, it automatically starts up another one, and then when it comes back down, it will actually kill the instance. Right, so then, yeah. So, comes into a bit. Anyway, so that's Container. So I can actually look at one of these. I can see how long it's been running for. I can look at logs. I can go into the console if I need to. I can see what environment variables it's using.
So it reads all that from the YAML file.
Yep.
And
I can
so
look at.
Can you edit the container through Cortana, or just?
Yeah, so I can SSH into the container. So if I'm in my normal command line, anything I do here, I can't do to the container itself, right? So I can't look at files until I go into the container.
Yeah.
So if I look at the containers that are running, I have all my containers, and here's the web one.
Yep.
So then I've got to actually, this is essentially the same as SSHing into a server, right? So now I'm in the server, so now I can go to something like var html.
Cool.
I got stuff in there. Now if I exit that, just to demonstrate, go into my var dub. I don't even have a www directory. So you can see that they're completely, even though they're running on each other, they're separate.
Yeah.
And nothing within that container has the privileges to access
The
outside of the container.
Right.
It's all contained.
But in theory, you could set it to be able to get out of its own container.
So,
Or could you?
Why would you want to?
I don't know.
so here's the thing. Here's the thing. So you've got, take the images directory in Joomla, for example. The user uploads to that. Now, if I kill a container and start up again, or move it somewhere else, or whatever, that directory is dead. Right? It's what do we call it? Is it persistent? No.
It's transient storage.
Yeah, there's a word for it. So what I've got to do is, what I can do with a container is I have my host, and so if I go back to my whiteboard, so I have my host. Now I have my container here, but what I'll do is with my things like my images, my main documents and stuff, I'll have my Joomla container. I'll have my slash whatever slash images directory on my host, so they're stored on the host. And what you do is you mount this directory
Okay.
into the container.
Volume.
Yeah, a volume, exactly.
Yes.
See, you've heard of containers and Dockers, haven't
Just a little bit.
you? Just a little bit. Right, so you mount your volume inside, and then that way, when that container dies and comes back, it just remounts
Right. Okay.
and it keeps writing.
Right.
So it's
So-
like a disk image, essentially.
Yeah. So it's mounting a volume on the server, right?
And in theory, that mount point could be a separate physical server. It could be a separate container.
You wouldn't have it as a separate container, but
Formats.
you'd have, because it's just storage, right?
Yeah.
It is storage. So you wouldn't necessarily have a container for storage.
Right. Okay.
Okay, because that container can die, it can go wherever. So you'd have a data store. So one thing that I'm currently working with is using S3 with Joomla, which there is a. So I have used EFS in the past and had issues with read write and all that, and everything I've read, everyone's like, S3 is a better way to go. There's a tool called S3 Fuse, I think, which is a tool that allows you to mount S3 just like a normal volume.
Like MacFuse.
Yep. And essentially, the way that would work is, I'll run the command on the host to mount that onto the host, and then the container will mount that directory into the container. So when a user uploads documents and images via Joomla, it will save it into S3.
Right. Okay.
And then when another EC2 boots up to share the load, user will log in, a user might upload something there or whatever. It'll go in different directories and different servers, but because they're using the same S3 as a centralized store,
Yep.
it'll all sync up. So when it happens on one server, it'll sync up to S3 and sync down to the other EC2, right? So then you can have 20, say
Yes.
running, and it's all consistent. So yeah, it's all I can really say with it is go to the Docker website itself. Really well documented, explains a lot. There is a Windows application, a Mac application. There's also command line. Start using it. Look at the the Joomla Docker is actually an official image that's maintained by the Joomla team, so to say.
Do you use that, or do you have your own?
At the moment, we have our own. So, but the documentation on this, in terms of getting started, and
Yeah, I was just
so
having a look at it. It's like
yeah. So here you can see they've got an example stack.yaml, and you can see that it's going to start up the Joomla using the Joomla image. So by default, the way the image works is if it's just written like that, it'll default to actually looking at hub.docker.com for an image and pulling it down. So you can have your own Docker image repository. So here at Butterfly, we have a hub.butterfly.com where we store our custom images that we want to use. Sometimes I pull from here as well for like the Nginx proxy because it's lightweight. You know, there's no need to have a custom one. But yeah, by default, it'll use that. Has a restart policy. So basically, what that means is, say you reboot the server for whatever reason. When it comes back up, if you don't have it set to say always or unless stopped, the containers won't start. So if they were to reboot the server that this container is running on, the container will actually automatically start up for you. It's linked to this container here, Joomla DB, and the container is running on the server on port 8000. But we're passing traffic to it through port 80, and the environment, we got some environment variables here, so the database host is Joomla DB, so so anything, when you have a look at these compose files, any containers built in here are automatically allowed to talk to each other. So you know when you start up Joomla and you've got to put in your database host, and in some cases it'll be localhost by default. Where they've put Joomla DB is essentially the same as localhost. The Docker magic just automatically knows that when that is trying to look at Joomla DB, it goes, actually, I know to send that to this container. And yeah, so then you've got the Joomla DB set up there, which is using, so it's using the MySQL image and the specific version of 5.6. So they've actually specified what's called a tag, which whenever that container builds or gets started, it'll always use MySQL version 5.6. But with this Joomla one, it doesn't have that version. So it's always going to pull the latest version of Joomla that's available. Can be good, can also be bad. So you might actually specify, you might add colon 3.9.4 to make sure that it always pulls in that image rather than, the latest.
Quick question, does it allow you to specify a range for the versions, like with Node and Package Manager and everything?
Don't think so.
Okay.
I think you just specify it. So, and then it's all. You can see here it's got different variants. So you can go Joomla version and then Alpine to run an Alpine-based image, which, as you can see, it's less than 5 meg when it builds. So it's quite small. I'm not sure what the default it runs as, but up here you can see all the different variations, so you can actually get it with Apache already running. So you'd run Joomla colon 3.9.5-Apache, and it will actually build you a Joomla image that has Apache built into it. Right? FPM, so it'll build a package that has PHP FPM in it running. Alpine will just be Alpine, and so on and so forth. So yeah. Now we're going to go into Git. So here at Butterfly we use GitLab, which gives you a the option to actually self-host your own Git repository rather than having to sign up online and that. So you can actually start up your own GitLab Community Edition container and run your own repository using a container. Alright? And they're a verified publisher, so that's actually coming from GitLab themselves. Right? So, but yeah, they've got a huge whole bunch of docs, training. There's so much material when you want to get into Docker that it gets nuts, because the next level is you start looking at Docker swarms. So I spoke about having a high availability Joomla site, so I can go next level and actually do the same thing but have load balance containers, right? So instead of starting at EC2 instances, I can actually have multiple containers that share the load instead of just one container taking everything. So that's, you can either use Docker Swarm, which was built by Docker, or Kubernetes is another one, but that I think was built by Google from memory, which is all about container orchestration and load balancing, and it gets nuts. But this is a good place to start if you really want to get into it. Has all the instructions. I mentioned Portainer. Getting that actually up and running is, I do this every single time I need to install Portainer, is I go portainer.io/installation, and all I do is copy that command, run it, which just creates a volume for Portainer, so that no matter what happens to that container, it's got that, it keeps the data. And then I run, so this is what a Docker command looks like. So it's basically telling Docker to create a container and run it in a detached state. Open up these ports for me. So when I access my dev on port 9000, send that traffic to port 9000, right? And to have that volume as well as that volume there. And that's it, that just runs up, and the first time you go to Portainer, it'll ask you, do you want to run this to manage your local containers? So in my case, I'm using it to manage containers on my dev. I can also use it to remotely control my containers. So I can tell it that I want to connect to different hosts and manage everything from one Portainer. And yeah, and then you just enter a username and password and off you go. But yeah, super simple.
Do you have to install Docker locally first?
So if you're on a Mac and you're using Terminal on your Mac, you just download Docker for Mac, and it's an actual application that gets you up and running. You specify what directories you want Docker to be allowed to use, and off you go.
Okay. Cool.
In terms of the world of Linux and stuff, you do have to, do apt-get, add repositories and all of that. Everything is documented. So if I go get started, is this where it is? Where is it? Get Docker. Docker CE. So if I go to Linux, I can choose whatever the distro that I want. So in my case, it's Ubuntu. And then it's got all the commands I run to install Docker. I want Mac OS. Download the
Do you have to have
package.
Docker desktop?
Yeah. And because it's Mac, it just works.
Yeah.
There is also Docker for Windows. So what that'll do, that'll install and allow you to use, say, Windows PowerShell to run all your Docker stuff as well. Right? So, yeah, it's, once you start using it and understanding how everything works, I don't know about you, but I got excited. Right? yeah.
But you think it's still mostly useful for large enterprise level sites, or it could be used on
I
smaller
reckon it has
scales?
its purposes for smaller sites
Yeah,
as well, to be honest. Because then you get into the land of like, when you start getting more into your Git processes, so you get into your automated deployment, your CI/CD stuff, understanding Docker as well. It gets used a lot. So, if I have a look at something that I'm currently working on, this is me trying to build my automated, what we call a pipeline, right? And what this does is I have a build step, which reads from a Docker Compose and builds my image and pushes that image to AWS ECR, which is a Elastic Container Repository in AWS. So that's like my own hub.docker in AWS. And I've got a deploy step, which then is going to deploy my configuration to Elastic Beanstalk, which then reads from a file to pull that image and start my containers from there. Right, and it's all done instead of having to run terminal lines and all that.
It says it failed though, doesn't it?
It has failed, yes. But I got green ticks for my build, so my build's working. Right, I literally go in terms of this branch. So I've got a specific branch set up here while I work on this. When I push to GitLab, it'll automatically build it and automatically deploy it. So it gets pushed out to prod. Not prod. It gets pushed out to when I actually get this into the QA branch. It'll get pushed out to the QA environment automatically. So, and when you build these things, so if I open up, no, actually I can do it here. So in GitLab you have a single file which is your configuration for your pipelines essentially. Even the thing that is running all the deployment scripts and everything is a Docker image. So what it does is it pulls this Docker image that I've built, starts up the container, and then it goes through and does what I've told it to do. Right, so when you start going down that path, it's important to understand how Dockers work and all that, so then you can get your head around all this stuff. Which brings me to my next subject. Git. So
can I just ask a related question that you might be covering? Thinking in Joomla terms, you spoke before about how you kind of need to link up to some persistent storage for your images folder, so you don't lose things. How does using Docker containers affect how you just work with Joomla day to day? Like, ooh, I'm going to install a Joomla plugin or extension now. Do you just go and do that in the normal way, or do you approach things a bit different?
So you do approach things slightly different. So what you would want to do essentially is work it's when Git comes into play, right? So here we would have a dev would have the Joomla side actually, they'd have the repository, and they'd say have have their say source directory of the project mount symlinked into the www, and then they'd run install components via the back end, and then commit those components via code and all that stuff. So
which you can then deploy out to your production side.
How does that handle database entries?
You've got to run the updates in your database.
So if you
Yeah, but I mean, if you're installing a component that has its own database tables, and you install that locally and commit the files to Git, that's not going to help with the database tables.
But what you can do is you can use the Discover tools to
Right. Okay. So that there's another
and
step.
to repair those things.
Yeah.
Well, the Discover do they always up? I guess they must do.
Yeah,
As part of the install process, there's a database build
SQL
table. Yeah,
yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Git. What I'm going to do is go through some
Managed to go for a fair while.
basic stuff when it comes to Git. First off, it doesn't matter whether you're in GitHub or GitLab, you're usually going to create a project of some sort, a repository. And now you need that repository in your dev environment. I've gone through and I've set up my SSH keys and all that jazz, so I'm going to use SSH to clone. So start off simply by
That thing that James has just glossed over, by the way, is an extreme pain in the ass to actually sort out and get working.
it's not because it's documented.
Written by someone who uses Vi every day.
Yes, indeed.
Speaking of which, so here all it's doing is it's connecting to that URL, which is my Git, and pulling that down and creating a repository on my dev machine. So then if I look at my directory here, I have my folder here for mjug git, right? Now, Git, you have things like branches, and you have remotes, which is all the different places you can push and pull to, and all that jazz, right? So there's a command called git status, and this tells you what branch you're on, what your current commit level is, and if you have anything to actually commit to your job. So here we can see I'm on the branch master.
That speaker is in an annoying spot, isn't it?
Right.
The bottom in particular.
Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a file.
Nice one.
Good idea.
Okay, so I create an index file. If I do another git status,
Ooh, we have a new file.
it says I've got an untracked file. Why is it called untracked? Because I haven't actually put it into Git yet. Git's acknowledged that it's there, but it's not doing anything with it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to commit it to Git, and I'm going to cheat and just do a -n, which means, so with a commit, when you commit your changes, you kind of add a message or a description of what your change is, right? So what I'm going to do
Called
is
good documentation.
yeah, creates starting index.html file. I'm not going to go through. Oh, whoops! First, you got to do a git add, right?
Let's do the doc,
And then I'm going to do my commit to actually commit the changes, and then you're going to ignore those messages. So with Git, you can add post and pre-receive hooks and all these other configurations. So when you do commit, so here what you see is when we commit changes, we have scripts that then run through any PHP and tell you how shit your code is essentially, right?
Oh, okay.
It's not in the default setup of
No.
Git. It just happens to be in our base thing that I haven't actually ripped out yet. So now if I do a git status, I can see that my branch, so what's on my dev, which is based on the origin, so where I pulled from. Right? So now I'm going to do a git push. Git push origin master. So now it's counted the objects and it's pushed it to master, so push it to the origin. So if I refresh here, I will see that I have my index.html file and I have my commit here. It tells me what I did, so I added that line. Okay? So that's all, the basics of that is all great and well for tracking your changes and all that, right? So now, what I can do,
So the good part of Git is that it stores all of those pushes and all of those commits. So it keeps every version of that file that you ever modify and push to Git.
so if I vim the index file and I go changing this file and I save that and I do a git status, I can see that I've modified it. So I'm going to commit it. I'm going to ignore that message. I'm going to do another git status. And now that I'm on the branch, and this is going to tell me that I'm ahead of my origin master by one commit. So that means that what I've got on my dev has one more commit more than what the origin does.
So a commit commits locally, a push
Pushes
commits that
those,
commit to the master or to
no,
the
it doesn't
whatever.
commit it, it pushes.
Right.
So it's like layman's term, FTPs your changes up.
Right. Aha.
Layman,
Okay.
that's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
exactly
I get the
correct,
idea,
but layman's
yeah,
terms,
yeah.
right? So, and then if I do a git log, I can see that I, on Wednesday, April 17, changed the file, and I created the file there, right? So, if I was to go into a...
Because you haven't pushed, your online version, for want of a better word, is
Yeah.
it's just got test.
Yeah.
Right.
So if I go into this and I go git status, because what branch am I on? So I'm on a staging branch, but I go git log. I can actually go through and I can see every single change that's happened on this branch. Right? Now, I'm going to do a couple of things here. Create a couple of files. So if I go back to files, I can see I've got my new files there. I can go to commit. I can see that I've got these commits. I can look at them. I can see what's been changed and all that. Now, let's say that I have a team. That I'm working in a team, and I say to Liam, I want you to write my contact page, right? And because Liam's a good developer, he doesn't want to mess with anything that I might be doing, right? And also, because we're good developers, we test our code and make sure it's not going to break anything in production. Now, so what Liam will do after he clones my repository is he'll create a branch, right? Which will take a copy of whatever branch you're currently on at that present time, right? So if I go git branch Liam contact page.
It's pretty specific for a branch.
You might have two developers, and each of them has to vie for which contact page gets accepted. So
So like
perfectly normal.
At Butterfly, so for service desk, for example, for service desk, for example, we might actually create a branch that has a ticket number and a actually brief description of what our branch is created for.
Okay.
Right.
Wow.
So it could be like BSD 1782,
Adding-
page CSS fixes,
Yeah.
or whatever. Right. Anyway, so if I do a git status, I'm still on the branch master, and my branch is up to date with my origin master branch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what we call a git checkout. And I'm going to say, actually, I forgot what I called it, and I'm going to do a git branch dash v, and it's going to tell me the branches that I have. Git checkout. So now we can see that I've actually switched to Liam contact page. So now I'm going to make some changes to this.
No. If you make changes, you'll introduce bugs. It's perfect the way it is.
Empty file. What could go wrong?
Could throw a PHP tag in there to get rid of the command message.
Alright. So
You put a die command in there.
okay, so I've done that. I'm going to add my contact page. I'm going to add my commit message, viewing contact page, like you said. Right, and then I am going to push it to the origin so James can check my work. But I'm not going to add the master branch because I'm not on master branch. I'm going to specify that I am pushing that branch. Right? So now we can see that it's pushed it all up. This is just a message saying you've created a branch now up there. If you want to do a merge request, so a merge request is because when you follow good processes, you shouldn't merge your own work in, right? So I'll push a branch up to my origin, and I might say to Liam, I might do a merge request, and I'll actually assign Liam to approve it. So then Liam will log in, and he'll do what we call a code review. He'll go over the code, make sure everything's all good, and he will actually approve that merge request. I mean, there is nothing stopping you going in and approving your own stuff.
When you're working on your own, that's kind of what you have to do.
Yeah.
If your permissions are set up, you can prevent.
You can have it open so you don't have to do it, but it is always good practice if you have the ability to make sure that other people approve merge requests and stuff. So
And
anyway.
you may not always get a command line indicator saying you can create a merge
Yeah.
request and go to
That's
this
not it.
URL.
I didn't
You
do
have to
that
set
either.
it up, I think.
So now if I have a look at my repository, and I have a look here, I can see I've got another branch. Right? Now if I look at the contact file on this branch,
Quality stuff.
right, we've got some changes. Now, if I actually change back to my master branch, it's still empty. Right? So in a scenario where you have the prod server, which will usually be running on the master branch, the changes won't take effect until, you know. So what I can do is, when I'm working locally, I'm working on my branch, I'm not affecting anything else, I'm kind of isolating to my own stuff, right?
So that create merge request in the top right hand corner there.
Yep, so what I can do,
You'd have to
Is-
switch to the other one.
this is just a shortcut. I don't, because of how GitLab works, I don't need to switch or anything. It just tells me I recently just pushed a new branch, put a new commit in, so I can just, it's just a shortcut. So I can assign it to me, or I can actually assign it to another team member. I can add labels to it, milestones and whatnot. And what I can see here is that I'm going from that branch and I want to merge it into master, right? And I can see the comment there, the commit message there, and I can actually also view the changes, so I can see that he's added all those lines, right? So then I'll submit.
It's just an example, not a reflection on your programming skill.
Oh no, it absolutely is.
Oh.
Totally.
And then I'll merge that in.
Don't get the wrong idea. I'm not a good developer.
Looks like the UX stuff that I'm working with someone on.
So then when I go back to have a look at my master branch, I can now see that my contact is there.
Right.
Okay, so that's up in the origin, that's our central repository. So if I go back here and I go switch back to, okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull from the origin, and we can see that I've pulled, and the contact.html file has had 138 changes to it. And if I look at git log again, I can see, so there was a commit there for the merge, but then I can actually see that there's that there. Now I can grab that commit, and I can go git show, git show, insert. And this will actually show me
What was committed?
what was actually the changes that were made,
In that
right? So it uses diff to actually
Right.
tell you the difference between, right?
Do you do emojis through the browser interface?
No.
No, it would be full.
So I will git check out. Actually, let's do this. What I can do is git checkout. Now, if I add a -b option and then go James stuff, that'll check out. That'll actually create a new branch called James stuff, as well as check it out. Right. So it's like doing the git branch and then git checkout in one command. Right. So you can see I've switched to the new branch James stuff. Okay, so then I will vim contact, and I will go, well, actually no, I don't like that, so I'll delete that and go right? And then I'm going to go git add contact, git commit -m, changing contact. Okay. And I'm going to bypass the whole pushing it. It'll actually not better. Git push origin.
James stuff.
Yeah, that's the one. So that's going to push my charge into there. So because I know my stuff's better than what's already there, I'm going to go git. I'm going to git checkout master or staging or QA. And then I'm going to go git merge James stuff. So what I'm doing is I want to merge another branch into the branch that I'm on. So there we can see that the content.html file I've merged in. There's been one file changed, 4 insertions and 38 deletions. Then I do a git push origin master. And now if I refresh what I see here, I can see it's been changed. Now,
Can you also see the history of those changes?
yes.
Yeah.
So I can go history. I can see the different commits that have happened. So I can actually go back to them. So I can look at creating files and see that there was actually nothing done, right? There's nothing in it. I can also, I just love the way it's worded, and look at the git blame. And it blames the person who made changes on that file.
I've had a few practical instances where the storing of old versions of particular files has saved my ass, quite frankly.
Oh, really?
And Git, yeah,
So
it's useful.
let's say that my change for argument's sake, let's pretend I'm not a master and I'm debbing away and I've made a change that was has really broken things, right? Or let's say I am a master and I'm trying to be a cowboy and doing it directly on a production site, because we all know I've done that before, and I broke it because I have a syntax error and all that, and this website's down, and I don't have time to actually go through stuff. I just need to revert those changes and get it back. So what I can quickly do is, just like I was doing before where I go git checkout master, you can actually, it's a temporary revert essentially. I can say I want to go back to the file when it was first created. So I grab the hash for that commit, and I can go git checkout that commit. So we can see that we're checking out that commit. What it does is it puts your working copy in what's called a detached state. So the master branch still exists there with those commits, but you're working in a almost like limbo state, right? Essentially. And I can make changes and create a new branch from here. And let's say I really like those, and I don't care about the work that I've just reverted from because it broke stuff. And I don't have the patience, and I just want to, I don't care. So, and I do this from time to time when I just give up. I can do a git reset --hard, and I'll actually check out back to this. If I go git log, everything's gone and it's back, right? So that's a permanent reset, okay? Not ideal in most cases, but in some cases necessary. The downside is if I push this to master, I also have to do another thing that we all love is a -f, which means force it. I think that should. So I'll check master back out, and then I will do my git reset, and then I will git push
protected branch.
Goddamn defaults. So now what we'll do is we'll go into settings. I think it's in repository. So you know things are good when you've got to actually disable things. So now protect that.
Is that a GitLab default?
Yeah, so we've set it up that way just to make sure that people don't do what I do.
shit, though,
But
shit.
you know, I hold the keys to the kingdom, so I do what I want.
What was that about cowboy?
My team loves me for it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure they do.
It was the best thing getting Liam. So Liam was originally a developer, and then he kindly came onto help desk to help us out, and he's still there. And he helped us quite a lot with our Git processes. So we can see that I've actually read it back. And obviously the bad thing about doing the reset as well is I've lost all those commits. So I've literally,
So if you roll back to a particular
I've rolled
Git,
back,
you
I
lose
don't
all four.
have everything before that, right?
Yeah.
So you only do it in dire circumstances. Right.
Because I'm not a cowboy and I don't do this. When you have done this, do you still have your other branches with their history?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Just
so it only
curious.
affects the branch that you did the reset on.
that's what I thought.
Right.
I only do reset hard to uncommit changes locally
Yeah.
rather than public. So if you, for example, did this to a project where multiple people are working on it, and they expect master to be in a certain state, it can cause problems for them as well.
So you wouldn't actually do it to master. If you do things properly, you wouldn't do it to master. I did it because it's a demo. It's a demo thing, and it was the quickest and easiest way to demonstrate the reset.
For sure.
Right. So
I've done the reset, but on a dev branch
yeah.
a couple of times. No, I'm technical.
Apparently a small cowboy.
What else was there?
Teach them how to get rebase. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Nah.
My interesting thing is with the git merge, the way we've actually been doing them is not using the merge command, but just actually git pull origin the branch.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and that does the same thing.
Yeah.
basically.
So if you're if you're on a branch and you get pull, if you pull from another remote
Yeah.
the same branch, it'll also merge all your changes in,
Yes.
right? But you do have to be careful because I've had instances when I've been on, accidentally forgot that I was on a different branch, gone git pull origin
Yeah,
a completely different branch, and it's actually pulled that branch down and then gone, well, I'm going to merge that into your current branch that you're on.
You've got to be careful.
Right.
Make
So,
sure. I always type git status before I do anything, just so I know which
It's not,
branch
it's not
I'm
built
on.
with AI, come on.
and what happens is the branch that you pulled has a whole bunch of changes from weeks ago that you never had. So, and what happens, it doesn't just merge everything into commits at the top. When it merges it is, so
It's thorough.
if we got a branch that's here, I don't think I can draw.
No.
It can get messy. So we have a branch, right? And I branch off here, and they've branched off here, and then they've merged in here, and I'm still working down here, and they've merged in, merged in, merged in. And if I merge my branch into there, all those ones all go in here. So I've actually got my own commits within there. So that's when you can't just reset back because you've actually got to. Yeah, it can get.
I've only got 2 branches.
If you can maybe show them the graph with one of a project that actually has commits to it.
Is it graph?
So go repository on the left. Graph.
So there's a graph.
Who knew?
I may have tried to teach them, but
You never mentioned a graph.
You
So,
can lead a fish to water, but
so here,
I think in effect I've mostly just taken over doing a lot of the more serious Git stuff.
so yeah, you've got the master branch, and then staging has been. Does it start at the bottom or? Oops.
So at the top is the most recent things. This one's pretty neat looking because it all has been merged in. But you'll see that there's multiple lines which correspond with different branches, and the commits made to those branches along a timeline.
That's clever.
see a lot of fixed merge conflicts there.
So sometimes that'll happen when you have edits in the same file in the same place, and it tries to merge and it has conflicts, and then it's okay when there's one or two files, but if you've got like several files, it can be a pain in the
Can
ass.
be a nightmare.
I've given up and just gone to the devs sometimes going, yeah, you fix it.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah. And you can hover over and see different.
And you can click on it and see what files were changed.
Yeah.
It'll open it in a new tab, I think, for this.
So it actually goes to the specific commit. So this is a GitLab file that does all the CI/CD pipeline stuff. So yeah. Just like any old good, you can also create repositories. GitHub is the same thing. There's a whole wiki component. So if you want to actually have documentation, wiki's part of it. So there's actually some documentation on this one. So yeah.
You're surprised someone has done some documentation.
It's more that a lot of our projects don't have specific things that need it on a project level.
A lot of our documentation is in other places, either in Confluence or on our own wiki or
Yeah,
yeah.
makes sense.
Any questions? Anything that you want to know that I've missed?
No, good.
That was good.
That was good though.
Thank you.
I have to remember to get you to build my contact pages in the future.
Yeah, I
Pretty
hear.
detailed.
Looks
Put
like
it
it.
into service desk, I'll sign tonight.
There was a typo on line 4 though.
Not FDFD, just FD.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you for enlightening us.